Hello, everybody, and welcome to Publish Me, Punish Me, a comedy series that's examining deal practices in the games industry with me, Evva Karr, founder of Glitch.
And me, Sun M, the studio director of Perfect Garbage. Each episode, we dive into topics about indie publishers, crowdfunding, equity deals, and more.
So whether it's the good, the bad, or just the plain yikes, we're going to go into all of it. If you enjoy listening to a mess of friends talk about game development, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel below. What's on deck today? What are we talking about today?
Today's topic is kind of a big one. Who gets deals? Who are they? Who are these people? And
is this supposed to be a rhetorical question?
Yes. Why can't I be them? Every day I look in the mirror and I'm dealless and I begin to wonder.
Who do you think gets deals?
First-person shooters.
Yeah, 3D games, right? Like 3D action games oftentimes will get deals, or even like 3D action games that are derivatives. So they might be like the softer, kinder 3D action, like 3D like RPGs. So EDAR is this organization that does basically like reporting every single year. If you look at like the top genres of where most gamers like play games, that's usually what I would think of immediately as like where are games mostly funded. It's actually along that axis, is like what are the most highly sought after genres within the games industry. And oftentimes it's like action, it's role-playing games. Sports games also are listed under there, racing games and such like that. And since they are like a research group, I actually feel like the majority of the games industry, indies included, tend to look to a lot of these like reports and see like, okay, where are the players? What are the market sizes for a lot of those? And those are typically the ones that get funded.
So there's a genre that's clearly getting picked all the time, which is action, RPG, sports.
So what we're saying though is like genre has a big influence.
To bring us back.
Yeah, just to like bring us full circle back, like genre clearly has a really big influence on what games get funded. And if it were me, I tend to just follow along and see what genres it is that are quote unquote trending from EDAR, but and others too. But I think there's a whole conversation that you were alluding to not too long ago, Sun, which is like, who is making these games, who is funding these games, and then who is reporting on these games and the type of players that are actually playing those games. I think we have a lot of information and a lot of data. We've put in a lot of dollars. We've put in a lot of research. We've put in, we've made so many games in this series of genres, right? And I find that really interesting.
Do you think that it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy and that they're also the only games getting these budgets, so therefore they're the only games getting played, and then that feeds into itself constantly for an endless cycle?
Viewers, what do you think?
I think there is. Listen, if I have to play another COD, I'm actually really excited for COD. The point is, so indie is mimicking in some way so far, based on like really rough estimations, because I think actually I would argue no matter how long indie has existed, it's still just starting.
We're
like
still pretty young.
Yeah. Does that mean that there's this wave that we are expected now in the indie sphere to kind of be going for these kind of, I'm going to say bigger genres, because so far the genres we listed do require 3D, action mechanics, some kind of momentum, movement. I'm not saying open world, but I am also seeing that trend of indies attempting bigger and brighter maps, which is totally fine. And I actually also have those dreams,
Sun's Bloodborne.
I will make it.
It will
FromSoft,
exist.
call me. Like, the point is, like, this is clearly being mimicked in the indie sphere. But does that mean these genres are getting the money in the indie sphere in the same way that they would in AAA? Which actually brings me to this other viewpoint of that means teams and like scope and like accomplishments to like land these deals. So I guess I kind of want to focus on teams, only because, again, we've mentioned that they're mirroring AAA, but there's no way that indies, unless you're secretly not an indie, can mirror the level of AAA studio workforce. Does that imply that like larger indie teams also get deals better than smaller teams, or are smaller teams preferred because there's less people to know about?
I think it always depends on the size, right? Like what I often like to think of is like, if it were me, what type of studio do I actually want to build? If folks are interested in making something that is a 3D open world game, that is a certain type of budget, and that is going to require a certain type of team. Who gets deals? It's the people who learn and know how to scope well. It's the people who understand their genre. It's the people who are well equipped, I suppose, to execute on what it is that they are interested in making. And so understanding where you're at in that space is really key and super important.
I agree. I do think that there's extraneous factors because in my head, I feel like people go in already having an angle, right? Like if I know an action RPG is going to be the most likely funded, I mean, I'll put my own flair on it. I'll have my own desires that I wish to achieve from this game, but I am going to mimic as closely as I can some kind of formulaic. So I guess this is perfectly segues into our next topic, which is that I think that, yes, team, genre, scope of project all really, really matter in landing these deals. But I also think who you're pitching to really comes into play. Because I think that there are like, and we've talked about it before on the show where we talked about like publisher libraries and investment funds that like look at specific genres. Because I think that, like, for example, something that I think is shaky, even though I really want us to go in that direction, is that genre bashing is still relatively hesitant. If I said I'm making an RPG turn-based mechanic with a dating sim element, no one will really bat an eye because that's very common. But if I said I'm making an RPG turn-based mechanic dating sim that is also like The Sims, I don't know how, I couldn't even think of another genre to throw into it.
Throw in a fighting game too.
But like that's like a relatively new thing. And I don't notice a lot of publishers kind of finding in genre bashing. It seems to like to stick in that. They like small tweaks to genres. They like subverting the genre. My original question was it compared to hitting everything right versus what publishers want in their library. So I guess I really did go on a tangent.
So basically, like if they are if they're doing everything right, what other factors are there? I think who you're talking to is another factor. The timing in which you are talking to someone about your said new great idea.
That is
it might just not be the right time, or it might be a freaking great time for your idea at this moment. And the third part is the team who is pitching said game. So I think those are like the three additional factors. If you have the absolute right game and you've scoped it well, you understand who you are, you understand your players, and you have the perfect, juicy, most delicious game, the other three things are almost in a way like variables that you may or may not have control over, which is the way that you pitch, who's pitching, how you pitch, if you're having a good or a bad day, if you are so freaking sad because you've pitched for the past year and you haven't gotten any traction. Maybe you've gotten a ton of traction and now your mood is in a different place because you can negotiate because there are multiple deals on the table, right? Like I think that is another variable or a series of variables that have an impact on whoever's pitching. Timing, again, like timing is so crucial. It might be a good or a bad time. Maybe they're at this is the most dirty, disgusting word that I hate in our industry and many other industries. But if you're facing like a harvest period, and harvest periods.
As someone who writes space horror, I really want to know more about harvesting.
What is a harvest period?
Do they reap the seeds they sowed? Like,
that is actually it. Yeah.
Wow. That's
so no more investments. They'll be reaping the seeds that they have sowed, and it's harvest season, and so there won't necessarily be anything that's going to be funded in that time. But maybe in a year or two when there's a new season. Essentially, if harvest season is happening, you might want to hold on and wait for another season or start talking about the next season that's coming up, right? Because of the fact that timing is wrong. And I think that's something that we all don't talk about nearly enough. Timing could honestly mean the difference between your game getting made or your game not getting made, or maybe your game getting made later because it's a better time for it. That's a whole nother thing. And then the third thing is, of course, like, who are you talking to? And who you're talking to could be a huge range. Like, is this person a decision maker? Is this person someone who is the one who's writing the checks? Is this someone who is going to advocate for you in the studio or in said location? So I think there's a lot there as to who gets the deal, but there's a lot to think about as to how to construct those interactions and how to construct something that might be a little bit more in your favor. And then the following question is, what if you don't have the perfect game and the perfect team, which is literally like 99.9% of most people, especially, BIPOC, queer, and women founders? I think that's a whole nother story and a whole nother conversation that I feel like we could talk about for literal days.
So this is like the one time I almost want to be like, take a note from the publishing in the book world, which is awful because I think that industry is also a hot mess. But publishers and agents will often list when they're on a no submission period.
Interesting.
Or no queries during this time period. They're not looking at anything. They're not taking anything. And I think that by listing it, if publishers and investors and funds, because a lot of them will say, like, rolling admissions, but
yeah, or even platforms. Yeah,
exactly. And it's not really rolling admissions. It's we're not looking at anything, but maybe we'll come back and look at them, or we're just waiting for that one gold nugget to appear and then be like, wait, that's something interesting. I always want to talk about it because that was such a blow to me when I first started, and you had told me that. Actually, you had told me that there's scouts that actually actively have are maintaining the whether it's investing or publishing or even platform, that they have active scouts who are actually doing a lot of the deals that their quota that they want to hit, and then people who submit are kind of like what's left. They might find the diamond, like I said, the diamond in the rough that they're like, this is it, this is the game, and they submit it to us. But usually it's based on scouts. So I think that would be pretty neat if anyone who had money or support for indie devs actively listed. If it was truly rolling admission, that's totally fine.
Ours is truly rolling admission.
Shout out to Moonrise Fun from Glitch. A lot of places aren't, and it would be cool to help indies nail that timing that is considered so die hard important.
I wish there was actually a way to truly think about or potentially even map out some of those timings. That could be a really fun. Yeah.
In the fall, fighting games are in, but in the winter, they have to be in race cars. I'm not getting over the racing. It's also important to know how many games they just announced, because they might not have funding at this point if they have a whole slew of announcements happening. So it really is research, hard work, and luck. Hard work mostly is preparing the pitch deck, knowing your audience, working with your team, those core aspects of game development.
Yeah. And then I think there's another, added layer of who are you? And that's going to have a big impact on the potential results of your pitch. So do we have deals today, son?
We do. We do have two deals.
Are they good? I'm scared.
They're fun. For me, they're not fun. I don't know how to tell you this, but the show is called Punish Me, and Publish Me's there. One of them is positive.
Okay.
And another is a little bit more negative.
Okay, my body's ready. No, it's not, but just...
So the first one, here's what they've said. I'm a new developer who got screwed over by my first publishing deal at 18.
And they're so young.
I know. That's what really got me about this one is I understand. I understand when you're up and coming and every kind of deal looks good because you're starting out. And I also really want to iterate that it's never your fault when you're starting out, because
that's so
people
true.
prey on that. People do.
Yeah, that's so true.
The publisher asked for 98% of my net project revenue, leaving me with only 2% of all income. Not knowing any better, I was excited and took the deal, especially since they had promised my game would be on Xbox Live Arcade. So it's a third party who was like, maybe implied some connection or relationship to Xbox to get the game on Xbox Live Arcade. The worst part was that they took control of the IP, hired an external team to make the game, and then I barely heard from them again until they told me that the company was going under.
It just keeps getting worse.
As soon as I read that, I was like, oh, jeez. I had to buy back my rights for the game before it ever shipped with my parents' help, and I felt like an idiot. You are not an idiot. Everybody faces these circumstances when they start, and it is so prevalent in almost every creative medium industry that it's not just games, like it's not just comics, it's not just books, it's not just music, all of it. All of them are like this.
It's too predatory. Like there's too much gross BS out there, and like this story upsets me. I'm pretty freaking mad.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go super much into, I know we usually go into who they're pitching to and what are they asking for, but this feels like a situation where it was mainly IP being taken at a really high cost to them, I mean the developer, and then them seeing none of the fruition of their work. But I do want to mention one section. We talk about like the fundamental terms being offered in the deal, and they do talk about the 98% to 2%, which is, again, nuts. The IP control, but they also mentioned a recoup period. And I had to realize, like, did that mean that the publisher would make the money back that they had spent on the external team first before they started getting that 2% of the revenue share?
From my understanding, it is there's a publisher that gave this person money. They are taking 98% of net revenue, giving you 2% of net revenue, and then their whatever money they might have in addition to whatever they gave you, they are hiring an external team to finish out the game, and they will have a recoup period of however long that they need to make back all of their money up until they make back all of their money, then they'll give you your 2%. And I can imagine if the deal is this bad, they might include, so they might give you a chunk of money at like $50,000, and then they give $50,000 to another team to make the game. So they have to recoup $100,000, and then you'll make your 2% off of any additional sales.
That's what I had a feeling it might have been.
I think it might be that.
Plus the external team that they hired.
Yeah. But they would have had to dangle some sort of money in front of said developer for them to give up, 98% of their net revenue. And we didn't even talk about for how long yet either. Is there like an expiration period on this?
There was nothing else. Yeah. If there was, it wasn't listed, but I have a feeling that the company going under interrupted all those plans.
From the information that's here, it feels like they bought out the IP. That's why the developer no longer had ownership of the IP anymore, and then had to buy it back with their family's help. I keep going down in my head in terms of money, but they must have put down like $10,000. And since this is someone who's 18, they're like, oh, $10,000, that's a lot. But now they don't have ownership anymore, and instead they're just doing like a revenue share. Well, I'm glad they were able to get it
back.
Yeah, I am too.
But kind of want to know
what cost.
I want to know what has happened to it. So if you want to update us later on like what happened to it, I actually really want to know.
Please talk to us.
I hope you got to make it later. This one was such a unfortunately short and sweet that it doesn't leave room for our usual. What were they getting? What were the terms? The situation, because the situation was almost kind of clear cut. So, is
this even a question?
Would you take this deal?
Hell no. No, it's so bad. This one's so bad, and I'm so sorry for the developer that had this happen to them at 18. Like that's
this would traumatize someone from like games.
Someone took advantage of you, and that's really freaking messed up. So if you are watching this show, shame on you. Like
the publishers.
Like whoever did that. Like that's really messed up. And hopefully someday someone will say or name them, because this is that bad.
On the bright side, it must have been a fire IP fire. I hope you do something. I hope you've done something with it since.
Yay, congrats on at least getting it back. That's like
That
the
is the
silver
truth.
lining on it.
Seriously, because some people don't, and it just dies and goes away and is lost the oblivion of bankruptcy. And sometimes they'll sell it, the IP, to like another studio. Like, moving on to our somewhat more positive. We are an indie studio that makes original IP and supplements income with client work on the side. Hashtag indie life. You know how that is. Me with like 4 jobs. I understand. We got into an agreement with a major partner. Think like the level of like Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers, Disney, like that kind of big,
like client
big
work. Yeah.
That paid pretty well. So we thought, why the hell not? Let's take it. The pitching process ate up almost 6 months of our time and money. It overall included negotiations, time with lawyers that we needed to pay out of pocket, but still good on you for lawyers at this like level of type of deal. And all of that just to get us to signing. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning. The title was mobile and similar to something we've made before, so their producers thought that we could reskin everything and ship. Not only was their team mostly absent, we faced numerous milestone rejections and minimal feedback aside from making the game feel better. Without much additional guidance on what they wanted, at one point, the director's son showed up and suggested edits to make the controls more like Fortnite, and they wanted us to legitimately implement that. We ended up going over time, over budget, and the game was eventually scrapped. Luckily, we had a kill fee, which compensated some of our time, but overall, it was a pretty bad experience that made myself and the team feel like we lost time on our own original IP. Now, the reason I said this was somewhat more positive, this didn't impact them in the way of losing their own copyrighted work, which I felt like after that last one was like such a big one. But what I'm getting from this deal is that it was a time waster and a lot of back and forth draining effort. So they weren't pitching. This was a service to client relationship, which I think is the first time we've had one on our show. All they were looking for was just money so that they can make it, money for the client work and to fund their own games and things of that like. This was in the 51,000 to 200,000s. So what they received was $250K for 2 years of development, roughly, on a mobile free-to-play game. No recoup, straight cash. IP is completely and entirely theirs. It's literally work for hire. And they don't get recognition or credit for their work, which I thought was the nuts part. Because everything else I was like, this is work for hire. I get it. But I'm very anti work for hire that doesn't give you industry standard credit, even if it's just a shout out to the studio or however they want to format it. So they did take the teal. But how do you feel about client work like this?
It's fine. I understand. And I understand needing to supplement what it is that you're working on in order to be able to make the thing that you really want to see exist, especially if you don't want to be like beholden to someone, right? Like I can see a world in which someone does do client work in order to be able to fund the thing that they want to do. A ton of people do that. And I'd say that's probably like the majority of creators and the majority of developers. So I get that and I get that life. This deal in particular, I only like going into deals in which I like the producers and they come with like good game knowledge, or even if they have shipped before. And I like to ask folks who they've worked with previously. So something that I tend to do is I just say like, hey, who have you worked with in the past? Most of the time people will be like, yeah, here we worked with this person, we worked with that person. And then I DM them and I'm like, how was this? Because if it's horrible, it's a heck no. Because again, like that feeling of wasting your time is the freaking worst. I can imagine, again, like in this world, saying yes if it were the right opportunity, if it made sense for me at the time. On the surface, the answer is yes. I would have probably taken this because I'm trying to put on like my developer hat and say like, yeah, if it's something weird, if it's something new, if it's something that I know someone's not going to pick up, I would totally, just want to self-fund it and not be beholden to anyone. And that's okay.
Well, that made me think about how much it costs to make. So they got paid $250K roughly for 2 years. And based on how the wording is, it's a team. And I'm assuming more than 2 people.
When I think team, I think like, 2 to 3.
Yeah.
If it's 250 and they're taking it for 2 years, they're probably smaller than 3 people. And if they are not,
that's what I was worried about. Like, that's
yeah.
not a salary for
I mean,
2
it
years
depends
of
on
time.
location, right? So I don't know if it's if the studio is based here in the US, that would be challenging. If it's based in Canada, a little less challenging. And if it's in like Latin America or, you know, in any other emerging country or emerging territory, like that could mean a heck of a lot.
And I know we mentioned it briefly, but I'm always firm in whenever you make a contract that they have to signal your work in some way. If it's not like a thing that they blow up, so be it. But I think it's always important that in some contract that you have a way to find the recognition of your studio, because that's how you get more work, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
So I always find that suspicious when a company would want to do that.
Yeah, and I would also add to, like, for this in particular, I don't know how many revisions they went through, but just a number of revisions that you get before it gets charged additionally. Like, just make sure that it's in the agreement and it's clear right away, like how many revisions you can do. I'm going to toot my own horn here and say I've been told that on average, I am pretty great to work with because of the fact, like specifically with artists, because I say like, I'm only going to do 1 revision, 2 revisions max. So like if it works at that point, great. If it doesn't work, then we will just either like pay you for your time or do a kill fee or a termination or some sort. But ultimately, like, you shouldn't be stuck in revision hell, because that is the worst freaking thing that could happen. Is like, the longer someone wants to revise, that's more time from you. And is that assumed that you're getting paid during that time, or is it assumed that it's under the current agreement if it's an entire project, or if it's hourly based, or whatever that is? But I think those milestones and the number of revisions need to be really, really clear.
So ultimately, as you know, they did take the deal, like you were mentioning. It's client work. They wanted to fund their own games, which we both understand greatly. But I liked their comment on outcome, which was, felt like we wasted time.
That's very charming. I mean, it sounds like you did waste time, and I'm very sorry.
Right. I'm glad that it only went for 6 months as opposed to the 2 years.
Yeah.
So that project was scrapped before, you know, you've sunk in any more time into it. And I'm glad that you had a kill fee, which I think is pretty new to a lot of studios too. And that's a great mindset to have, especially when doing client work. Kill fees are so important. So that's really good to hear.
I appreciate that, you know, they did it. They went through the experience. It was fine. It wasn't horrible. They got paid. They got out. It didn't take too terribly much time. I mean, like 6 months is still a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, if it's like a typical 2 to 3 year development life cycle, it's still relatively small. So they hopefully got back to their own IP, now had a little bit more money, and hopefully they got whatever that game was out. So yeah, it wasn't as bad as that last one that you gave me, son.
I am filled with wonder. Thank you, wonderful people, for joining us on this episode of Publish Me, Punish Me. Ava has been thoroughly punished, I guess. We hope that you learned something. Kill these. And order
timing.
If you have a past deal that you want us to discuss, please click the Google form and send it our way.
Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed the show. And also, we would honestly love it if you continued the conversation with us over at discord.gg/heyglitch. And we'll see you next time. Maybe we can have a one-off episode that's called like Publish Me, Love Me.
Valentine's Day special.
You have once a year, you get one episode that is nice.